Greetings, everybody. We're back. It's good to see you here. We're recording high atop Chapel Hill in Studio 720. Glad that you're here. Glad that you're tuning in, dialing in for tonight's presentation. Amazing. I was thinking about this today and thinking about how exciting and how interesting it was going to be to talk to you about today's topic, to share with you some of the latest thinking around super technologies and the mighty S-curve. Listen to this. It's important. Technologies aren't just evolving individually. One of the things that's really interesting in the field of technology right now is how easily technologies are being combined to create new technologies and incredible technologies. And a lot of things are giving rise to this. First of all, there are standards, and standards are important. And for the longest time, technologies were incompatible because of a lack of standardization. And basically think of standards as a common language, a common set of expectations about how technology will interconnect, how it will operate, and what it can do. And so what's really happened, I would say, over the last around 5 to 8 years is a real uniting, if you will, around standards and an evolution in technology where we can create standards that are more understandable, more compatible, more useful. How about that? Just simplify it. They're just more useful because of technology itself. And I think also there has been a realization of the opportunity beyond individual technology. So there are business cases now for combined or merged technologies that are really compelling. I mean, just really compelling out there. And so you're seeing that be a stimulus and a reason behind technologies that are combining. Well, when these technologies combine, then you get, as we mentioned earlier, the capability of almost magic. These technologies seem like they can do things that we just couldn't believe were possible. And yet, here they are, changing our world, remaking our world, reestablishing industries, inventing new industries. It's really interesting if you think about it, where you are in career and, in your walk along life's journey, there's a possibility, a very strong possibility that you might finish your career in an industry that hasn't been invented yet. Think about that. Isn't that interesting? That you might finish your career in an industry that hasn't been invented yet. And I can remember when I first started my career in teaching at the university, one of the courses that I was given to teach was it's almost like a correspondence course, but it was a course where I would go into studio, I would talk and demonstrate technologies, and it would be beamed via satellite to campuses all across the university system. And we thought it was so sophisticated. Little did we know that we would evolve into what we're doing with Zoom and other technologies. Little did I know back then how a classroom would change, or how being a professor would change, how that would be different, and how research would change. So I almost feel like I am in a career that I didn't dream of when I started out. And so that's very exciting, and it should be very exciting for you. And these new industries, these new businesses will be created by combinations of different technologies. And to me, it's very exciting to think about that, and very inspiring in a way that there's this whole new frontier out there of technologies, of businesses that you're going to be able to apply your leadership skills to, that you're going to be able to participate in, to watch them grow, and to shepherd them through, and then turn over the keys, if there are keys, at that point, turn over the code or the touch to someone else. So let's dive in and let's take a look first. Two things tonight. This will be a shorter recording. I'm going to try to walk back some of my enthusiasm. It's hard to do because I want to share this with you, and I'm excited for you and for me about technology. But I want to talk about two things. Super technologies, show you what they are, show you some ways to think about it. And again, this is a great way to approach project number 2, if that's the project, one of the projects that you choose to do, is to approach it from the perspective of super technologies. And then we're going to start moving our discussion more towards how technologies are impacting organizations. And I'm going to share with you a really important managerial tool, leadership tool, and I think just something that's incredibly interesting to think about, and that's technology adoption. How do organizations adopt technology? And as a leader, as someone that will be leading the charge to ensure that technologies adopt new technology, how do you guide that as a leader to help an organization responsibly adopt new technology and guide that so that organizations don't reject new technology? Because that's certainly the predisposition, I think, is to hold off adoption of new technology until it's almost too late. So we'll talk about that, and we can guide our discussion using the S-curve, which is another one of your projects. So again, if you're interested in doing the S-curve project, which is a very popular project, that will be the second discussion. So let's dive into the first one here and get ourselves immersed into the world of super technologies. So let's grab this icon here and launch into it. And here we go. Okay. Okay, great. Let's go to super technologies, and away we go. All right. So again, as I talked about earlier, the magic of super technologies is the ease of which they can be combined. Many barriers that separated these technologies in terms of combining them have now gone away. So let's just go back to something that should be very familiar to you by now, but sort of cast in a different format. Super technologies. Now, I don't want you to put on your technology hat here. I want you to start to think about this as an MBA. This is a great way to present to a group of executives the important technologies that are changing the world and how they're combining to create new businesses, new business opportunities, new revenue models, things that, again, industries, businesses that are to be invented. And what you see here is basically the 7 technologies that we have gone over. So I won't go over them again in this video, but you should be very familiar with them by now. But added with that is this nice Spider-Man, if you will, type of diagram that connects them all together. And what I think, the thing that I like to think about here when I present this, and again, this is something that I have presented to many groups of senior executives. I actually have this great little consulting business where I will go to a group of senior executives that want to understand technology, but they don't want to talk to their own organizational leaders about it. They want to talk to someone from outside. And this is what I'll show them. I'll say, well, here are the classes of technologies out there, and they're all important and they're doing interesting things, but what's really on the horizon are combinations. So one way to do this, and it's really kind of fun to do, is just to take these spheres, you know, each one of these, if you think about it as a basketball or however you want to think about it, and think about it as something that you can move around. You can take some of the balls away and then rearrange what's left, and you can get different combinations of technologies that result in different super technologies. And you can see here that the permutations of this are pretty substantial. There are lots of different combinations that you can come up with here. when you start to think about different technologies, how they might combine to create super technologies. And I think the key, if you're presenting this to senior management or trying to talk through this, as far as a strategy meeting goes, is certainly to pick out the different combinations that might heavily impact your industry, that might really change what the industry is doing and might really inform us about new avenues of value, new products, new services. And that's what I try to do when I'm working with senior executives, is to know what their business is, know how it's changing, and then try to get different combinations of these technologies that might really be resulting in new products. Now, again, true to my technology forecasting model, the one that we talked about very early on, I'll also start to show physical manifestations, in the presentation. So if I'm doing a combination of these technologies, I'll say, and here's some early physical manifestations, and then move it on into business models, quickly moving into different revenue models. And so I'm going to try to do that as I go through this and talk to you about it. So some of the stuff I'm going to show you here are actual visuals that I use when I'm working with senior executives that really want to understand what's happening in the world around them, vis-a-vis technology. But I don't want you to take this as, well, okay, here's Professor Seegers just preaching to us about these different technologies. I've got to remember them and somehow incorporate them into a presentation so that, I can move on. If you'll do me a favor, just for me, do it just for me. Think about this as a way to start establishing business cases. Because it's a really important skill. And I think that I've seen MBAs do this very, very well, particularly Kenan Flagler MBAs, because I think that part of our school, part of the program, certainly what I picked up from the program, was this ability to think a little bit bigger and to think a little bit more broader about the impact of business, not just to get caught into a product or service. But what I really picked up out of my journey through Kenan Flagler and through the MBA program was really this idea of thinking a little bit bigger about industries, thinking a little bit bigger about, sort of, to me, dominoes, that, well, if this changes, what are the dominoes fall? And what does that mean for us? So as you're thinking about this, think about it as a way to illustrate what is going on in industry. And I'll tell you this, just a little tip between me and you. When you're doing stuff like this, when you're presenting these different types of strategy frameworks, I really believe you have at most 3.5 to 4 minutes to lock someone into your presentation. If they're not locked in 3.5 or 4 minutes, they're gone. They're thinking about something else. So you really want to try to make quick work of trying to lock people in to your presentation. And this is a great way to do it. Say, hey, we're going to look at different combinations and different outcomes, different business models. Keep that technology forecasting model in mind. Reference sciences into manifest technologies, things that we see that are early physical representations of the technologies, and how those might be cycling first, second, third, or perhaps it's gone through a cycle, and then the business models. Okay. And you do all that without setting it up as long as I did, but you and I need to coach you a little bit. So allow me just a little bit more time to explain it. Let's dive in. These are not all the combinations. These may not be even the best combinations. They are just some combinations to show you how to use something like this to begin to think about business cases. So let's dive in. First of all, if we take machine learning, mesh networking, biotech, and pervasive, so let's just take that combination of technologies, and notice here we've got 4 out of 7. You really get a super technology, remote medicine. The idea that we no longer have to go to the doctor's office or to the hospital, that we can receive treatment, we can receive diagnosis, we can receive information remotely. Now, part of this, again, in mesh networking and biotech, if you just go to the far right there, let's just take machine learning out of it. Mesh networking, biotech, and pervasive computing. That's wearable devices. That is implantable devices that are gathering information about us. That's bioinformatics, which we talked about. And that is a whole new way of gathering information about us and communicating that information back to our physician. If we add the machine learning piece in there, then what we get is some diagnosing capability of the technology. Perhaps the technology is monitoring us. It picks up an arrhythmia or something troublesome, and that is relayed back to the physician. Or certainly what I would hope for you and for me is that it's telling us, good job, well done. And of course, I experience this every day wearing my Apple Watch. I certainly want to close those rings every day, and also perhaps do a little more than what I've got myself scheduled for. But for some reason, if I don't close those rings, my workout rings on the Apple Watch, I feel a little bit like a slacker. I feel like I should have done a little bit more, but I love it. To me, at first I was a little skeptical of that type of technology, but now I absolutely love it. But that would give us remote medicine. Now, the next step for you here is to say, okay, well, here are the different technologies around remote medicine. Here are some early physical manifestations of that. You know, this might be the first, second, third physical manifestation of it. Maybe something has cycled all the way through. And then to quickly jump into the business models. And here are the different business models. And a business model is just how you create value. It's wonderful to build this technology, but if you can't create value, then what's the point, right? It's not something that can be monetized. So one of the things I think that's really important, and certainly one of the things that I learned through business school training, was the value of creating value. That has to be done. Certainly technologies last longer and are more useful if they're creating value for the company that produces them, value for the people that use them. And I'll go ahead and stand on my soapbox. They're not harming the environment. Hopefully they're helping the environment and the community and are available to the people that need them. So remote medicine. Second one, which is really interesting, printable super materials. And again, notice here that along the way, I'm showing some pictures, some examples. That is a fully printable basketball shoe. They're pretty cool looking too, all the way down at the bottom of the screen for different materials. 3D printing, nanotechnology, and machine learning. The reason that machine learning is important there is you're going to need some computational power and some ability to sequence atomic structures to know what chemicals can be used to print, how those chemicals can be combined. So again, what's really interesting here, you're seeing the addition of technology. 3D printing and nanotech are okay. They're good, but what really adds the value in printable super materials is that machine learning piece. And so as a business person, what you're doing is monitoring the progress of those three technologies together. And hopefully you're seeing leaps in machine learning that are paving the way for new super materials that can be 3D printed. And of course, all that is based on using atomic structure, which is the heart and soul of nanotechnology. So again, this is a way you can present it, a way that you can start to think about it in a business case. Gene editing, again, the most controversial one, but again, biotechnology, pervasive computing. And the reason I call that pervasive computing as part of that is that bioinformation for gene editing comes from surrendering your DNA, which is typically through 23andMe and Ancestry.com. And being able to do that, to surrender that DNA, then allows the science of biotechnology, the technology around biotech, and machine learning to sequence DNA and determine treatments that are customized for you. That's the machine learning piece. Without the machine learning piece, gene editing really has no future. There's nothing there. It would take too long. And I would say as well in machine learning, not just artificial intelligence, but quantum computing. Remember that? So if you look at quantum computing starting to go in there and become part of machine learning, then you really start to have a powerful super technology around gene editing. This is an exciting science. There are a lot of companies that are assembling themselves, if you want to think about it that way, around this idea of preventing disease before it occurs, of trying to understand genome sequences and why they occur. In fact, it was interesting, caught an article in Scientific American today where they were talking about COVID-19, and one of the treatments that's showing promise, and right now, you're seeing a lot of different technologies. I touched my face. I shouldn't have done that. Sorry. I wash my hands. I'm okay. But one of the things that is promising out there is to try to understand the DNA sequences of people that have contracted the virus, but have shown no symptoms and basically did not succumb to any aspect of it. They didn't even run a fever. There was no dry cough, nothing, and yet they tested positive for it. In their blood, there are likely antibodies that are useful in understanding that allow those types of people to battle this disease in a different way. And those antibodies may not be present in people that succumb easily to the virus. So understanding that is this triangle of technology, machine learning with pervasive computing, along with biotechnology. It's an incredible science. Again, really taking a look at treatment from the perspective of the human building block, rather than trying to give you something to ease the symptoms. Incredible frontier, just an incredible frontier here. It's a super technology. Nanobots, small robots that enter into your bloodstream or into your system and then work on your cells to try to make you better. Again, you see machine learning combined with biotech, but here we have robots and nanotechnology. That is the fierce foursome there, if you want to think about that, creates nanobots. Now, this is very, very early. Certainly a lot, I'd say earlier than even gene editing as far as manifestations and what I would call physical trials or physical manifestations that have been produced out there, but it is rapidly growing, really rapidly growing. Watch this. Here's a little magic trick as we move to the next one. If we add one more technology, we have printable nanobots. So again, you see the fierce foursome. Now we've added a fifth, 3D printing. Basically, this is the idea that a small robotic structure, and I don't want you to think of it as a mechanical robot. I mean, robotics can be a lot of different materials that are programmed to do specific tasks. But this particular robotic would enter perhaps your blood system or your circulatory system. It would diagnose a problem, and then it would be able to produce another robotic, another specialized type of machine that could go in and take care of the problem. That would be 3D printing at a micro scale. And in fact, if you look to the left there, nanotech and 3D printing, that is a very futuristic field that is gaining a lot of traction, where you build small machines, and don't think of them as, the robots that you saw, dancing around with me in the last video, but think of them as programmed structures. That's the best way to think of them, that can then 3D print other programmed structures, machines that print machines. Incredible. And that would be printable nano robotics. So again, a very interesting piece. If you look at the blockchain and sensors, that's machine learning, mesh networking, and pervasive computing. The idea of blockchain is to decentralize, as we talked about in the machine learning piece, decentralize authentication, transactions back to the level of the transaction itself. Well, to do that, you need a lot of interconnectivity at high bandwidth. That's the domain of mesh networking. You need computers and technologies that talk to each other and learn from each other. That's machine learning. And then you have devices that we can carry around to create that blockchain, or to provide a sensor for something that we're trying to monitor. This is a fierce triangle in terms of super technologies, a fierce triangle. There's a lot of money going into this. There's a lot of hype for sure, and you'll see a lot of hype. I'm not going to say that everything you read is true. Sometimes I will see something and I will say, probably not, or maybe not yet anyway. But there's also some real good business cases that are starting to develop out of this. This would be the heart and soul of Bitcoin, if you're interested in the group of technologies that form that super technology, which is, again, as I mentioned, in machine learning, I think it's the first or second form at most. A lot more to come out of blockchain and sensors. Autonomous machines. Oh, wow. This is the one that I think is talked about so much out there. Well, it takes about 4 of these technologies to create that world of automated vehicles and machines that are autonomous and work on their own. It's robotics. Believe it or not, there's a lot of robotics that are going to go into autonomous vehicles. Machine learning is the intelligence piece. Very important if you're trying to manage a traffic system. Mesh networking. There's not going to be one grid to manage all the autonomous vehicles traveling on an interstate system. It'd be too risky. It's going to be mesh networking. Short range, high bandwidth. And if one node goes down, another one takes over. It would be so risky to put that under the watch of one major network. If that network were to go down, you'd have massive traffic accidents. It would be like snow in a southern city. You don't want that. You do not want to be in a vehicle when it starts snowing in Atlanta, Birmingham, or even in Research Triangle Park. And of course, pervasive computing, because there will be devices that will be everywhere to monitor that. Smart street signs, sensors in the highway that monitor road conditions. We will not see traffic signs anymore. Those will be broadcast to you rather than wasting the metal and the sign space on the interstate. So really, roads should become a lot more, should become better looking. Our drives should be more scenic. One of the things I'll say about autonomous machines, and particularly driverless automobiles, I wouldn't expect that to really show up as automobiles that you and I would drive. I just don't know that the business case is there. Where the business case is to make long-haul trucking autonomous, so that when you see these trucks out on the highway, the long haulers, if that can be made autonomous, if they can be in a dedicated lane and governed by, again, this foursome of technology here, then automobile accidents should go down. You should be able to get stuff more reliably delivered, predict when it will show up. Your logistics would be incredible. And again, if you think that we're advanced in logistics these days, just go try to find some hand sanitizer or toilet tissue. We're not very good at it yet. We're getting better, but this would be one where we would be able to track that inventory in the trailer and distribute it, reroute it if we needed to places that would really need it. And again, if you look at protective health gear, then that would have been a real helpful thing. If that gear could have been identified, get it on autonomous long-haul trucks, and then even while en route, be able to redirect it if needed to places that are in desperate need. This is what you're going to see. This is an interesting foursome of technologies that are really combining to create some huge possibilities. Something a little far-fetched, but it's here. 3D printing, machine learning, and biotech, printable human cells. Wow. Yes, that is coming your way. One of the problems we have in healthcare is organ donation. There are many people that need transplants, particular kidney, liver, these types of transplants, and the waiting list is long. And this is terrible for the people that are in need to wait and not know. if this is going to become available to them before they succumb to kidney disease or liver disease or whatever is the problem. Certainly a better solution would be to print the organ using their own human cells. So this is another super technology. See the combination there. The reason machine learning sits in between it, you have to sequence that DNA. You've got to match the human cells of the prospective donor. That is something a little futuristic, but the early results, the first and second physical manifestations of this are already out there. It's already out there. So we're starting to see this. And if you want to see it in the dentist office next time you go, oh, the dentist. No longer do you wait for a crown. It's 3D printed right there in the office. I want to say installed, but delivered that day to the patient rather than the patient having to wait. Let's take a look at what might happen. Wow. Something to think about, right? And I thought that was a fun video to show and one to get you thinking a little bit. That doesn't mean that I buy everything that I see in the video. It's kind of interesting, though, the part there where they talk about implantable phones and being able to communicate via brain waves. Actually, what's going on there is that you might have an implantable phone somewhere on your body, but what you would have would be a wireless earbud or even an implantable hearing device that would be you'd be able to hear technology just like you do today, smartphones, and be able to communicate with that. But you know, look, no phone. I'm not holding it. It is implantable, and it is something that perhaps I might dial in. So it's kind of interesting to think about the possibilities. So it gets far-fetched ideas, which may actually turn out to be the real ideas, maybe just walked back one or two steps. So again, just something fun for you to think about as we close out the discussion on super technologies. Now, as promised, what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about the S-curve. And now this is one that is just best demonstrated by me drawing for you a little bit. And I love to draw. In the book that I just finished, I did all the illustrations myself. I'm a copious drawer, and that's because early on in my career, I went to many faculty meetings, and about the only productive thing, I hate to say it in a faculty meeting, is to sharpen up your drawing skills. So I'm going to try to do this and roll it right here with the iPad. But I want to talk you through what an S-curve is and why it's important. It's one of those technologies, or one of those technology ideas rather, that is just absolutely amazing in terms of its simplicity, but very, very powerful in terms of its application. So let's see if we can get this thing lined up here, and away we go. All right, so one of the things that's interesting about any organization, so let's just talk about any organization that you might work for or be a part of. Basically, what research shows us is that organizations, so let's just draw an organization here, okay? So an organization, so any organization, so it can be a company, it can be a university, is really made up of three large classes of things. It's made up of people, okay? It is made up of tech, it's supposed to be a technology there, computer, okay? And it's made up of process, okay? The way that things get done, and you can draw that out in a diagram. So like an accounts receivable process that has a certain way of doing things. So processes, technology, and people, this all make up a classic organization. So there's your organization. There's all the things that go in it. No problem, right? And you can apply this to anything that that you experience out there. You've worked for an organization. You're part of an organization. The UNC Kenan Flagler MBA is part. We are an organization, and we have people, we have technology, we have process. What's really interesting is that organizations, these three things, they sort of spin like a wheel. So if you think about these things spin. So just imagine that they're spinning like a wheel. They churn and they produce whatever outcome the organization is trying to achieve. So for us at Kenan Flagler, it is education and research. That's what we would do. Well, what's interesting is that every so often, new technology will come onto the horizon, and it will start influencing the organization. And sometimes what it means is that the new technology has to replace the old technology, something that's already out there. But these things, like you say, they're spinning wheel, they're all interconnected. So if we start to change technology, it's going to start impacting people, it's going to start impacting the process of the organization. And really what you call this is, well, it's change, you know, the big delta, change. New technology comes in and we have to adopt it. Well, this process, this interface right here between new technology and the organization that has to adopt it, that's really what we would call adoption. So that's adoption. Now, a lot of things can happen in adoption. First of all, adoption doesn't happen, that we don't accept new technology, we reject it. So the organization continues to spin and we just ignore new technology. That's one outcome. We can adopt it, but we don't replace the existing technology that's in the organization. So we bring in the new technology, but we also keep our old technology. That becomes expensive. We can bring in new technology, but we don't manage the interface between the new technology and the people in the organization and the process. We keep everything the same, and so we don't leverage technology as much as we should. This phenomena, if you want to call it that, this state of affairs is really tough on organizations. It's really tough. Or organizations have problems dealing with it. They will resist technology when they can, or they'll mismanage it into the organization. It's really tricky. It's really tricky. And so there's a lot of research and a lot of interest by a lot of organizational leaders in successfully adopting new technology. Can we bring technology into the organization to modernize our combination of people, technology, and process, and do so without disrupting the organization, do so in a responsible way? But this adoption issue, this issue of adoption is managed by what we call S-curve. The S-curve. If you can successfully navigate a technology along the S-curve, then the adoption piece, this right here, becomes easier, or it should be less disruptive to the organization. Okay, so that's what's going on. Now let me show you what an S-curve is. This is fun. It's really a lot of fun. So let me show you what it is. And I've got a slide on it too, but it's really helpful for me to draw it out for you. It helps me to explain it. So thanks for letting me draw. I feel like if I teach too many classes without drawing, that I'm not having as much fun as I want to have. All right, so let's take a look at what the S-curve is. So to draw it out, fairly straightforward here. Okay. So let's label our axes. This is time. Okay. And this is productive use. This is when you're bringing a technology in, again, that adoption piece, and it's starting to be used productively. And we can also call this, if you want to, and I think it's helpful to think about this, adoption. You'll hear it called that, you know, the adoption of a new technology. It's going well, it's not going well. Now, here's where business starts to enter the picture. If we draw a line here, below the line, below this line, the return on investment is negative. I know that's a dirty word, but it happens here. Above the line, return on investment is positive. Now, return on investment really gets to this idea that we've invested $100 in the technology, and our productivity is giving us $1,000 more. We're more productive. Our costs have gone down by $1,000. We invested 100 and we got 1,000 in return. So that's what that line's showing. Now notice here, this is weird because typically you don't see this in business school, but there is this part of the line where below there is negative return on investment. So what I'm sort of foreshadowing here is that there is a stage in the S-curve where we know we're not getting return on investment and we're accepting that. I know that's weird, but it's really the way that you bring new technology into an organization. Rarely is new technology productive as we adopt it, and that can be for a lot of things. We have to train people to use it. Right now, if you look at Zoom and all we're doing in online education, this whole thing that we're doing now, more than likely our productive use is low. We're not really familiar with how to use all the features of Zoom. We don't know how to use breakout rooms. You're not comfortable with breakout rooms. You may have some resistance to doing classes this way because you felt like, hey, I wanted to be in class, and all of that's good. There's nothing wrong with any of that or thinking any of those things. But probably what we're doing right now as a technology adoption cycle within Keener Flagler is working below that green line. I'm willing to bet you that we're probably working at negative return on investment. So we're pumping a lot of resources into use of Zoom if we were plotting Zoom in the S-curve. But we're probably not getting perfectly productive use yet as a faculty or for you as a student. Don't worry about it. It's okay. What it means is we have to stay with it, the technology, continue investing in it and learn and hopefully get above that line at some point. You get the idea? I mean, so it's not that you want to stay below that line. I mean, the worst thing that could happen if we drew a curve, so let's just draw a curve here, that over time, and look at productive use on the vertical axis there, if we had this type of curve that went this way, that to me is the worst case scenario. We're never able to get it into productive use. Another bad case scenario might be this, where we move out of this, we start to get here, but then we tail off and eventually fall back. That would, again, not be what I would call a good outcome. And then it starts to hug this line at zero. At that point, you're really getting into a technology that's become a burden on the company. And believe it or not, that type of curve, what you're seeing right now, this type of curve, that was really the curve for email for companies for a while. It started climbing right here. You got to some productive use. People started using it well. Then they start sending bad jokes onto email. People start bullying on email. Email's not available to all employees, and it just tanks. I mean, and it's hard to get it out. And it doesn't mean that you can't make that change and move it up again, but you got to recognize when that's happened. So those are two real negative outcomes of technology adoption that you might see, where it never really gets above that line. So you really have to watch this. You really want to make sure that that technology is behaving the way that it should. But if you start to take a look at this graph and start to plot it out, if you're a leader, particularly looking at technology, it'll tell you that we may have a technology adoption problem. Every time we bring new technology into the company, we start out. Let me get that out here. We start out okay, but somehow we're not able to keep the momentum. We move up and down, and then eventually we fall out. That would really be a problem with adoption. What a lot of business leaders and a lot of consulting firms would say, and I've seen it, by the way. This is not something that is theory. This actually happens to companies. You can see it happen, and it's really unfortunate because, I mean, you're talking about millions of dollars. This isn't just minor stuff. This is millions of dollars. What you're hoping to see here in a good technology adoption scenario is the S-curve. So let's take a look at what that S-curve would look like. And as you're going to see, it is like an S, okay? Somewhat shaped like an S, serpentine shape there. This is what you would hope to see. This is what you would hope to see. In fact, let me just give you what you'd really hope to see. You would really kind of hope to see that just plateau, not really go down. Now, what you're seeing here is over time, the technology is below return on investment. It means we're learning about the technology. We know it's not going to give us return on investment, But at some magical point, you can see that really inflection point where it crosses the green line there, that technology starts to pay off. Now, what would happen here, we would call this right here. Okay, just right. We would call that the initiation stage. Okay, that's initiation stage. Now, I hope you're following me. I know you are. I know you're thinking what I'm thinking here. You really want that initiation stage to be as short as possible. We'd really like to see that line climb up over that green curve as quick as possible. Yes, there's absolutely no doubt about that. And so you would like to see that happen. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. But what you're hoping for there is a initiation stage that is shorter, that is well managed, and doesn't last a long time. If it lasts a long time, what can happen is at some point in the initiation stage, people lose faith and it just curves off this way. So again, if it lasts too long, you're really playing with danger there. You're really at a point where things can start to spiral out of control, and you start to lose faith in the technology, and it just dies. Now the problem is, again, and I hope you're thinking about this, you got other organizations that are out there competing, and they may have shorter cycles of initiation. And that would be sort of into the realm of what strategy folks call agile organizations, or organizations that are able to, adopt change a lot quicker. It's a huge advantage. I mean, huge, if you can do that. But many organizations can't. And that doesn't make them bad organizations. But I think if you're working in one of those organizations, this is a way you can start to illustrate to others that you're trying to influence, hey, we really have initiation cycles that are too long. And keep in mind, organizations don't adopt just one technology. You'll have an S curve for, maybe 50 or, 100, who knows how many technologies that the organization is trying to adopt. And so you can plot these things in terms of where they are on the S curve, or at least know where they are, and really understand the managerial remedy that you need to invoke. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So if we go right here to the second inflection point, right here, we call that the growth. Okay, that's the growth stage. Now, that should be pretty obvious because it's growing. This is the beauty. This is just, this is gorgeous right here. You're getting that steep curve up, that steep climb in productive use. So look over there to the left. Adoption's going well. You're well above the ROI line. This is absolutely terrific. The problem with the growth stage is that many times it grows so fast that use turns into misuse. Now, the way this happened in a lot of organizations, just in terms of using World Wide Web, the initiation stage back when World Wide Web sort of came onto the scene was fairly long. Then people get used to using it. It grows. It then reaches the next stage where use starts to turn into abuse, and we call that the control stage. Okay. In the control stage, the unintended happens. Customers misuse the technology. Our own employees misuse the technologies. And so what has to happen here is you have to institute some control over it. You have to start to institute things that, policy. You can do this, you can't do that. But you have to start instituting control. And then what happens here is you enter the final stage, which is transfer. Now, what's happened in transfer is the problems that were occurring in control have been solved, but because you're controlling the technology And because the technology is fairly mature now, you might see what's called a cycle. The technology has gone through a cycle and it starts to level off. So what you're seeing right here is a leveling off. We've got widespread adoption of the technology, but it's not growing anymore. It's leveled off. Now, here's the magic. What really good companies are able to do in this transfer stage, and watch this, okay, pay attention. This is really cool. In that transfer stage, if you're really good at it, what you do is you invent new uses for the technology that are so radical that it starts another cycle. And maybe, in fact, let's just give the company the benefit of the doubt here. Let's just say in that second cycle that we experience here, that it somehow shortens because hopefully you've learned and then moves this way. And then when you reach the transfer stage again, you're able to start all over. Now I know that's a busy diagram. That's actually a nice little work of art right there. But this is really important, really important. 4 stages, different personalities, if you want to think about it, of technology through those stages. So what does a manager have to manage through those 4 stages? So let's clean this up a little bit. This is going to be fun. So just watch this, okay? Let me just kind of repair the damage here. Okay, boop. All right, let me repair. Okay, now we're back to our little diagram. And we've got the mighty S curve that's moving this way. What you have at your disposal if you're a manager are 2 things. Number 1, you have Slack. So I'm going to put Slack as green. Number 2, you have control. Okay, control. In fact, hold on, let me just get that right. Okay, control. All right, Slack and control. And let's go back and populate our stages here. So that's the initiation stage right there. That is probably your growth, control, and then transfer. So we got initiation, growth, control, and then transfer. What's really interesting is that Slack is where you give the technology a lot of resources without expectation of return. Okay, you're going to give it a lot of money, give it a lot of time, give it a lot of effort, but you don't expect any return. I know that sounds strange. Don't tell any of your finance professors that I told you this, but there are times when we have to do this. So keep in mind, we kind of illustrated that ROI negative here, ROI positive here. At this point in the initiation stage, you're going to go Slack. Okay, and likewise, you're going to reduce control. Now, the reason you're going to do this is because you don't want that technology to die off too early and go this way. So what you have to do is be willing to give the technology a lot of slack so that we somehow reach that growth stage. Now, when it starts growing and we're getting all that productive use, again, we're going to cut on the jets here. A lot of slack and a little bit of control. But as we get into that control stage where we're starting to realize that it's being used for a lot of purposes that we don't want it to be used for, because see, notice here, it's still being used, but maybe what we're starting to see is a little counterproductivity. Maybe salespeople are using too much email to contact customers. They're using too many text messages and they're not visiting customers anymore. what we're going to do here, I hope you can start to see the pattern. We're going to start to reduce the slack, and we're going to start to put up some control. In the transfer stage, control and slack are pretty much even here. But if we start to see that there is a new purpose for the technology, perhaps something that gives us some additional capability, what we might start doing here in the transfer stage is giving it a lot more slack in hopes that, again, we can start the next curve through here. So slack and control. Now, slack and control, that's management, that's leadership. You know, we always talk about, you know, leadership this, leadership that, and, you know, what does it take to be a good leader and all that. You manage resources. That's what leaders do. It's great. I mean, it's wonderful that you do that. But that is the nature of leadership, is that you're going to either choose to invest or not invest in some things. Of course, you know, motivation and, you know, certainly mentoring and a lot of things that go into leadership are important, but really it's allocation of resources. Those are the strings you pull as a leader, our budget. And so the S-curve tells you how to do that. So in wrapping up tonight's session, let's just take a look at this illustrated in a slide form. And here you go. So here's the S-curve nicely illustrated. So that you got a clean look here. You got slack, you got control. Those are the things that you that you have as a leader. Notice your return on investment line, negative on the bottom there, positive across the green line. That S-curve moves up. Initiation, you're going to invest and experiment. Contagion is widespread use. You get, and that's also called growth, contagion or growth, same thing. That phase there, phase two. I think in my tablet illustration, I called it growth, but contagion, growth, same thing. Control, you start to mold and shape that technology through policy, and then transfer, you're hoping to expand and innovate. Notice the blue lines there. If you over control it, then the technology never gets a chance to get into the contagion stage. If you under control it, don't put enough guides on it, then productive use might fall off a little bit in the contagion stage. And in that control stage, if you fail to find new uses for it, then you never really get to that transfer stage where you can expand and innovate and hopefully start another S-curve. So if you think about what you're going to do if you take on this project as one of your final projects, really cool project. Take a technology like Facebook and see where Facebook is. I would say, let me go back to that real quick. I would put Facebook absolutely moving, I mean, head first into the control stage, sort of with the idea of you know, the news that comes onto Facebook that's false. If you want to call it fake news, or, you know, reports that are bogus out there. Facebook has really gotten to that point where the widespread use has turned into to abuse. And I'm not sure that Facebook is really stepping up, just in my opinion. My opinion doesn't mean that I'm right or wrong on this. My opinion is they really haven't stepped up to productively get into that control stage. They're still treating their technology like it's in the contagion stage. Facebook really needs to start to control and shape that technology so that in that transfer stage, they can start to think about new uses for it, new productive uses for Facebook. Instagram is still in that contagion stage. I'd say Twitter is still in contagion stage, perhaps moving into the control stage. Blockchain's in the initiation stage. I would say remote sensing is now in contagion stage as far as companies being able to use it. So again, this is sort of the crescendo, if you will. This is the real final part of that technology forecasting, of understanding where technologies fall on the S-curve, and then prescribing whether a company or an organization should use slack or control to effectively manage them. Okay, that sort of wraps up our time tonight. This broadcast, High Top Chapel Hill, Studio 720. I'm always happy to be with you. I hope you're doing okay out there. I hope you're remaining hopeful and optimistic. Help is on the way. It is. And someday we'll be at a class reunion talking about all of this and imagining whether it was really true or not. But help is on the way in technology, in policy, in the springtime that's coming. So keep working hard. Stay with it. Thanks for dialing in. And I will see you next time. We're going to transition now to a whole new part of the course where we start to look at the organizations that are out there and how they are innovating, how they come up with new ideas, and how they invest in those ideas. Until then, take care.